It began with a whisper in the back of my mind, something so faint that it could have been dismissed as paranoia. Jenna, my wife of 7 years, was everything I'd ever wanted: beautiful, ambitious, and driven. Her job in event planning had always kept her busy, but lately, her schedule had shifted in ways that didn't add up. Late-night meetings, business dinners that ran into the early hours, and a newfound obsession with keeping her phone locked. These things chipped away at the trust we had built over the years. I tried not to dwell on it. I didn't want to be that husband, the insecure, controlling type. Instead, I focused on my own work as a freelance designer, taking solace in the quiet moments when Jenna and I would laugh over a shared glass of wine or collapse on the couch to watch our favorite shows. But those moments became rare. The first crack appeared on a night when Jenna returned from a work trip looking unusually radiant. Her stories were vague, generic updates about the conference and meetings. Yet, there was a glow about her that didn't match the exhaustion of someone who had spent days in back-to-back sessions. That night, she kissed me softly, her lips brushing against mine. But something was missing. The warmth wasn't there. It wasn't until I stumbled upon a small clue, a plain ticket stub in the trash with a name scrawled on the back, that my unease solidified into suspicion. The name meant nothing to me, but it gnawed at my thoughts. Was it a client? A colleague? Or something worse? I told myself not to jump to conclusions, but the whisper of doubt turned into a voice I couldn't ignore. A week later, the first rail slip happened. Jenna had left for another business trip, her suitcase packed with precision. She waved goodbye with her usual smile, but this time, I caught a momentary flicker of something else. Guilt? I brushed it off as stress from work, but the whisper in my mind grew louder. That evening, I got a text from Jenna. Flight delayed. Might be late checking in. I'll call you once I'm settled. It was routine. Jenna always kept me updated during her travels. I texted back a quick, "Okay, love you," and returned to the project I was working on. Hours passed, and the call never came. By the time midnight rolled around, my worry outweighed my self-restraint. I called her, only for the call to go straight to voicemail. Unusual, but not unheard of. She could have been asleep or charging her phone. Still, unease kept me awake. The next morning, I woke to a text. "Sorry, fell asleep. Long day ahead. Love you." I stared at the message, something about it feeling off. It was too clean, too concise. Jenna loved to add little emojis or inside jokes when she texted. This felt mechanical. Later that day, curiosity got the better of me. While scrolling through Instagram, I noticed a post from a mutual acquaintance, Claudia, a picture of a fancy rooftop bar, tagged in New York City. Among the crowd in the background was someone unmistakable, Jenna. She was laughing, her head thrown back, a drink in hand. She was with a man I didn't recognize. The caption read, "Networking nights with amazing company." I told myself it didn't mean anything. It was her job to meet people, to make connections. But something about the way she leaned toward the man, her body language open and intimate, made my stomach churn. I resisted the urge to text her, instead choosing to dig deeper. I clicked on the man's profile, only to find it was private. His name, though, was one I recognized from the ticket stub I had found earlier, Elliot Hart. That night, I couldn't sleep. Elliot Hart. His name echoed in my mind like a bell tolling in the distance. Who was he, and what was his connection to Jenna? Was I just letting my insecurities spiral out of control? Or was there something more? Jenna called the next evening, her voice cheerful but rushed. "Hey babe, just got back to the hotel. Meetings were insane today. How was your day?" I tried to sound casual, but my words came out stiffer than I intended. "Good, nothing special. You sound tired." "I am. I think I'll crash early tonight. Big presentation tomorrow." Her tone was warm but guarded, and the usual rhythm of our conversations felt disrupted. When I brought up Claudia's post, there was the slightest pause before she laughed. "Oh yeah, that. Claudia dragged me to some networking event. I barely stayed an hour. You know how she is, always posting every little thing." The explanation was smooth, but it didn't erase the unease gnawing at me. I forced a chuckle, but my thoughts were already running wild. After we hung up, I gave in to the curiosity that had been simmering all day. I searched Elliot hard online, not expecting much. Instead, I uncovered a flood of results. He wasn't just anyone. Elliot was a rising star in the entertainment world, a charismatic actor who'd recently landed a breakout role in a hit series. His face was plastered across magazine covers and gossip sites, always accompanied by headlines about his charm, talent, and irresistible allure. And now, I couldn't shake the image of Jenna laughing with him on that rooftop. Over the next few days, I couldn't concentrate. Jenna's trip ended, and she came home looking as radiant as ever. She hugged me tightly, her perfume filling the space between us, but I couldn't bring myself to relax in her arms. I wanted to believe her, to trust her, but something in her demeanor, a spark of excitement, a restlessness in her energy, felt unfamiliar. That evening, as Jenna took a long shower, I found myself standing in front of her suitcase. My hands trembled as I unzipped it, guilt warring with the need for answers. Her clothes were neatly folded, her toiletries packed as usual, but at the bottom of the bag, tucked beneath a pile of scarves, was a small envelope. Inside was a handwritten note on hotel stationery. Had an amazing time with you. Counting the days until next time. My breath hitched. It felt like the ground beneath me had disappeared. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. This was proof. I stood there, the note crumpled in my shaking hand, as Jenna's voice floated from the bathroom, humming a familiar tune. It hit me then. My wife wasn't just distant. She was living a life I wasn't part of. That note, it felt like a bomb detonating in my chest. I stared at it, my mind struggling to comprehend the words scrawled in Elliot's confident handwriting. Jenna and I had built a life together, a foundation of trust, love, and shared dreams. But in that moment, it all felt like a lie. I didn't confront her that night. I couldn't. Instead, I tucked the note back into her suitcase, careful to leave everything as it was. I needed time to process, to figure out my next move. As she lay next to me that night, her breathing soft and steady, I stared at the ceiling, my thoughts a chaotic whirlwind of anger, sadness, and confusion. Over the next few days, I tried to act normal. It was harder than I expected. Every time Jenna smiled at me, every time she touched my hand or kissed my cheek, I felt a pang of betrayal. How could she look me in the eye and pretend everything was fine? The cracks in our relationship, once small and easy to ignore, now felt like gaping chasms. I began to notice more signs: her phone, always close to her hand, the way she'd angle the screen away when a message popped up, the late-night text she dismissed as work-related. And then there was her newfound enthusiasm for her appearance. New clothes, a different perfume, even a gym membership. She said it was for her health, but I couldn't help but wonder who she was really trying to impress. My suspicions consumed me. One evening, while Jenna was in the shower, I unlocked her phone using the passcode I'd seen her enter 100 times before. My heart raced as I scrolled through her messages. At first, there was nothing out of the ordinary. Chats with friends, coworkers, family. But then I found it. A thread buried beneath her work contacts, labeled innocuously as Elliot PR. The messages were damning. Flirty, intimate, and far too personal to be professional. Elliot, can't stop thinking about you. Last night was incredible. Jenna, you're impossible. I can't wait until the next trip. Just have to keep him off my trail for a little while longer. Him. That was me. She was talking about me. I felt my hands tremble, my grip tightening on the phone. The room spun around me as the truth settled in. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This was ongoing, a secret life she had carefully hidden from me. When Jenna stepped out of the bathroom, towel wrapped around her, I quickly set her phone back on the nightstand and pretended to be engrossed in a book. She smiled at me, oblivious to the storm brewing inside. "Everything okay?" she asked, her voice light and casual. "Yeah," I replied, forcing a smile. "Just tired." That night, I didn't sleep. My mind raced with questions. How long had this been going on? What did Elliot have that I didn't? And most importantly, why? I didn't have answers yet, but one thing was clear. I wasn't going to let this go unchallenged. In the days that followed, I couldn't focus on anything else. Every glance Jenna gave me, every casual brush of her hand against mine, felt like a reminder of her betrayal. I couldn't confront her yet, not without knowing the full extent of her deceit. I needed more than a crumpled note or a few text messages. If I was going to face her, I wanted the truth laid bare. I started keeping track of her schedule, noting every time she claimed to have a late meeting or an overnight work trip. I pieced together the gaps in her stories, the inconsistencies that had once seemed insignificant but now painted a damning picture. She wasn't just cheating on me. She was living a double life. One night, after she'd fallen asleep, I did something I never thought I'd do. I installed a tracking app on her phone. It was easy, too easy, really. She had always trusted me completely, never imagining I'd feel the need to invade her privacy. The irony wasn't lost on me. The first week, nothing major stood out. Jenna stuck to her routine: work, gym, home. But then, the tracker pinged her location at an upscale hotel downtown during what was supposed to be a lunch meeting. I sat there, staring at the screen, my stomach churning. I debated driving over to confront her on the spot, but something held me back. If this was what I feared, I needed proof. The next time she announced a business trip, I decided to follow her. She was heading to Los Angeles for a 3-day conference. It was the perfect cover: a busy schedule, professional obligations, and the distance between us. But I had no intention of letting her slip away unnoticed. I booked a last-minute flight on the same airline, careful to choose a seat far enough away that she wouldn't notice me. As I boarded the plane and caught a glimpse of her a few rows ahead, my heart sank. She was smiling, chatting animatedly with someone I couldn't see. My instincts screamed that it was him. When we landed in LA, I stayed back, watching as she made her way through the terminal. Sure enough, Elliot Hart appeared beside her, his hand brushing her lower back in a gesture so intimate it made my blood boil. They walked out together, laughing, unaware that I was following close behind. I tailed them to the hotel, watching from a distance as they checked in. Jenna glanced around nervously, but Elliot reassured her with a kiss on the temple, a sight that felt like a knife to the gut. I snapped a few photos, each one a dagger to the life I thought we had. That night, as they disappeared into the hotel, I sat in my car in the parking lot, seething. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I wanted to storm in, to demand answers, to scream at her for the betrayal. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I stayed up all night, my mind racing with plans. Jenna had shattered my trust, my heart, my world. If she thought she could walk away from this unscathed, she was wrong. I wasn't just going to confront her. I was going to make her feel the weight of every lie, every moment of pain she had inflicted on me. I didn't know exactly how yet, but one thing was certain: revenge was coming. The morning sun broke through the car windows, bathing the hotel parking lot in a golden glow. I hadn't slept, my mind still a storm of anger and disbelief. I watched the hotel's entrance, waiting for them to emerge. If Jenna's betrayal was a dagger, seeing her walk out hand in hand with Elliot would be the final twist. It wasn't long before they appeared. Jenna looked radiant, her hair catching the sunlight as she laughed at something Elliot said. He held her hand loosely, his demeanor casual and confident, as though this were the most natural thing in the world. They didn't even try to hide it. I followed them at a distance as they strolled down the street, heading toward a small cafe. It was tucked into the corner of a quiet street, the kind of place that would let them be just another couple enjoying breakfast. But they weren't just another couple. They were living a lie, and I was determined to expose it. Sitting at a nearby table, I could hear snippets of their conversation, their voices low but unmistakably intimate. "You think he suspects anything?" Elliot asked, leaning back in his chair with an easy grin. Jenna hesitated, her fork hovering over her plate. "I don't think so. He's been distant lately, but I don't think he knows." The words stung, each one a reminder of the distance she'd created between us. My heart pounded as I fought the urge to confront them right then and there. But I needed to hear more. "I just wish we didn't have to sneak around," Elliot said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "It's exhausting." Jenna sighed, her voice tinged with guilt. "I know. I hate lying to him. But it's complicated, Elliot. I can't just leave. Not yet. Not yet." The words echoed in my mind, a cruel confirmation that she had already considered leaving me for him. I clenched my fists under the table, willing myself to stay calm. I needed to keep listening, to gather every piece of evidence I could. As they finished their meal, Jenna excused herself to the restroom. I watched as Elliot pulled out his phone, his expression thoughtful. A moment later, he began typing furiously, a small smirk playing on his lips. My instincts told me it wasn't just a casual message. After they left the cafe, I followed them back to the hotel. Once they were inside, I sat in my car, staring at the photos and notes I'd gathered. It was more than enough to confront her, but something still didn't sit right with me. Why was Elliot so confident, so relaxed? It was as if he didn't see me, or any other consequence, as a threat. I decided to dig deeper. Back in my hotel room, I began researching Elliot, pulling up every article, interview, and social media post I could find. His public persona was charming and polished, but the deeper I looked, the more cracks I found. Rumors of affairs, power plays, and manipulation. He wasn't just an actor. He was a master of deception. And now, he had my wife in his web. That night, as I lay awake in the dark, a new thought began to form. Jenna wasn't just another conquest for Elliot. She was something else, something he valued enough to risk his reputation for. Whatever their connection, it was deeper than I'd realized. And if I was going to take him down, I needed to understand it fully. I wasn't just fighting for my marriage anymore. I was fighting for the truth. The days that followed were some of the longest of my life. Every moment felt like I was teetering on the edge of a revelation that would either break me or steal my resolve. My investigation into Elliot deepened, each discovery making him less of a man and more of a calculated force. He wasn't just charming. He was ruthless, a manipulator who thrived on his ability to bend others to his will. What haunted me most was how Jenna had fallen into his orbit. Was she a victim of his charm? Or had she willingly chosen him over the life we'd built together? I spent hours scouring social media, digging through comments, photos, and tagged posts. The deeper I looked, the more patterns I saw. Elliot had a history of these entanglements. Women who seemed to appear out of nowhere in his life and then disappear just as quickly. None had spoken out publicly, but the whispers were there if you knew where to look. One night, I stumbled across a private forum dedicated to gossip about the entertainment industry. Amid the noise of baseless rumors, one thread caught my attention. It was titled, Elliot Hart's Real Love Life, Darker Than It Seems? I clicked on it, my curiosity outweighing my caution. The thread was full of anonymous stories, each one eerily similar. Women who claimed Elliot had swept them off their feet only to manipulate them emotionally and professionally. There was talk of coercion, of promises made and broken, of lives derailed. It was chilling. And then, toward the bottom of the thread, one comment stood out. He doesn't just go after women randomly. He picks them carefully. Usually married, usually with something to lose. Makes it easier to control them. Control. The word sent a shiver down my spine. Was that what this was about? Was Jenna just another one of his pawns, trapped in his game? Or had she willingly let herself be controlled, blinded by the allure of his charm? I wasn't sure which answer was worse. Jenna came home 2 days later, radiating the same unsettling glow she always had after her trips. She greeted me with a kiss, her touch warm, but it only deepened the chill in my heart. I couldn't hold it in any longer. "Can we talk?" I asked, my voice firmer than usual. She looked up, a flicker of concern crossing her face. "Of course. What's on your mind?" I motioned for her to sit down. As she did, I placed the photos and printouts of her messages with Elliot on the table between us. The color drained from her face. She didn't even try to deny it. "How long has this been going on?" I asked, my voice calm but icy. Her hands trembled as she picked up one of the photos. "It's not what you think." "Don't," I interrupted. "Don't insult me by pretending this is anything less than what it is." She stared at the photos for a long moment, tears pooling in her eyes. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. 6 months. 6 months. Half a year of lies, of betrayal. My mind reeled at the implications. "I need to know," I said, my tone unrelenting. Why? She opened her mouth to answer, but no words came out. Instead, she buried her face in her hands, her sobs muffled and pitiful. I wanted to feel something, anger, sadness, anything, but I was numb. I stood there, watching her crumble, and felt like I was peering into the ruins of a life I no longer recognized. You chose him, I said finally, my voice steady despite the chaos inside me. You chose to betray me, to destroy what we had. Why? Her sobs quieted, and she looked up, her face streaked with tears. I don't know, she whispered. I don't know why I did it. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. Jenna's confession hung in the air between us, a heavy, suffocating weight. Her tears streamed freely now, her once composed demeanor shattered. She kept repeating, I'm sorry, like it was some kind of mantra, as if those words could fix what she had done. But they couldn't. Sorry? I echoed bitterly, pacing the room. You're sorry? Do you think that erases the 6 months you spent lying to me? Sneaking around with him? I didn't mean for it to happen, she said, her voice trembling. I love you, I swear. It just got out of control. Out of control? I snapped, spinning to face her. You're not a child, Jenna. You don't accidentally carry on a 6-month affair with a man who preys on women like you. You chose this. Every step of the way. You chose him over me, over us. Her face crumpled, and for a moment, I almost pitied her. Almost. I was lonely, she said quietly, her hands gripping the edge of the table. You've been so distant lately, so caught up in your work. I felt invisible. And then Elliot, he made me feel wanted. Important. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Part of me wanted to shout that she was twisting the truth, blaming me for her actions. But another part, the part that still loved her, even now, wondered if there was some truth to it. Had I been so focused on my work that I'd failed to see her slipping away? No, I said, shaking my head. Don't do that. Don't put this on me. If you felt lonely, if you felt neglected, you could have talked to me. We could have worked through it. But instead, you turned to him. Jenna opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. She knew I was right as the hours passed. Jenna's tears slowed, replaced by a quiet resignation. She seemed drained, defeated. For the first time, she looked small, like the weight of her choices had finally caught up to her. What is it about him? I asked, my voice calmer now, though no less bitter. What does he have that I don't? Her eyes dropped to the floor. It's not about you, she said. It's about me. Elliot, he's magnetic. He has this way of making you feel like the only person in the world, like nothing else matters. And you believed him, I said flatly. She nodded, her shoulders slumping. At first, it was exciting. The attention, the thrill. But then, he started to change. He became possessive, demanding. It stopped feeling like a choice. Her words sent a chill down my spine. It was everything I had read about Elliot, the stories from the anonymous forum. He didn't just seduce women. He consumed them, turning their lives into extensions of his own ego. Why didn't you leave him? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the answer. Jenna hesitated, her hands twisting in her lap. I tried, but he threatened me. He said he'd ruin me, ruin us. He knows people, powerful people. I was scared. Her voice cracked on the last word, and for the first time, I saw her not as a traitor but as a victim, a pawn in Elliot's game. But that didn't absolve her of the choices she had made. So what now? I asked, my tone cold. You want me to forgive you? Pretend none of this happened? No, she whispered, shaking her head. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even deserve it. But I need you to know. I want to fix this. I want us to find a way back to what we had. Her words hung in the air, a fragile plea for something I wasn't sure I could give. I didn't answer Jenna's plea that night. Her words rattled around in my mind, clashing with the whirlwind of emotions I couldn't yet control. Love and hate, grief and fury, pity and disgust. They all twisted together, leaving me paralyzed. I told her I needed time, and she nodded silently, retreating to the guest room without another word. That night, Sleep evaded me. I stared at the ceiling, the darkness around me feeling like a reflection of my life. Cold, empty, and suffocating. Her confession, Elliot's manipulation, and my own feelings of inadequacy all weighed on me like a crushing force. But beneath it all, one thought burned brighter than the rest. He's not going to get away with this. Elliot had taken more than my wife. He had taken my trust, my peace of mind, my very sense of self. He had wormed his way into my life, ripped it apart, and walked away as if it meant nothing. Jenna might have been complicit in their affair, but Elliot was the architect, and I wasn't going to let him walk away unscathed. The next morning, I called in sick to work. Jenna was already gone, having left early for the office without saying goodbye. I couldn't decide if I was relieved or hurt by her absence. Either way, it gave me the space I needed to execute the next phase of my plan. The first step was simple: gather more evidence. I'd already pieced together enough to confront Jenna, but if I was going to take on Elliot, I needed a mountain of proof. Over the next few days, I scoured every corner of the internet, every digital trace he had left behind. Social media posts, interviews, behind-the-scenes videos. I analyzed everything, looking for patterns, connections, weaknesses. It wasn't long before I found them. Elliot was sloppy in his arrogance, leaving behind a trail of carelessness that would have made any publicist cringe. His frequent networking dinners with married women, his habit of flaunting expensive gifts that weren't on his payroll, and, most importantly, whispers of discontent from his colleagues, assistants, junior actors, and even a few directors who'd clashed with him. I compiled it all into a dossier, every damning detail meticulously organized. But I wasn't done yet. If I wanted to bring Elliot down, I needed to expose him in a way that left no room for doubt. It came late one night, as I was poring over a series of photos Jenna had taken during one of her trips with Elliot. At first glance, they seemed innocuous. Shots of hotel lobbies, conference rooms, and rooftop views. But one photo caught my eye. In the corner of the frame, just barely visible, was a document lying on a table. I zoomed in, my heart pounding as I made out the header. Confidential, terms of agreement. Elliot hadn't just seduced Jenna. He had involved her in something far more sinister. Over the next few hours, I pieced together what little information I could from the photo. The document appeared to outline some kind of contract, but the details were too blurred to read. Still, it was enough to confirm my suspicions. Elliot wasn't just using his charm to manipulate women. He was coercing them into agreements, likely to protect himself or gain leverage. This was my opening. The following morning, I arranged to meet Jenna during her lunch break. She seemed surprised but agreed without hesitation. When we sat down at the cafe, I slid the photo across the table. "What's this?" she asked, her brow furrowing as she studied the image. "You tell me," I said, leaning forward. "What kind of contract was Elliot forcing you to sign?" Her face paled, and she set the photo down, her hands trembling. I can't talk about it," she whispered. "You will talk about it," I said, my voice firm. "Because if you don't, he'll keep doing this to other women. And because I'm not going to let him ruin more lives." She hesitated, tears pooling in her eyes, before nodding. "Okay," she said softly. "I'll tell you everything." Jenna's confession came slowly, hesitantly, like each word was a weight she struggled to lift. She admitted that Elliot had indeed coerced her into signing a non-disclosure agreement designed to protect him and his career. She hadn't wanted to sign it, but he had used every trick in his arsenal. Threats of ruining her professional reputation, promises of keeping things clean, and emotional manipulation. She was trapped, she said, and scared of what he might do. "He has connections," she said, her voice trembling. "He knows people who can destroy lives. I thought I could handle it, but I couldn't. I didn't know how to get out." Her words confirmed everything I suspected. Elliot wasn't just a charming actor with a wandering eye. He was a predator, using power and influence to manipulate women like Jenna for his own gain. But now, I had what I needed to take him down. "You're going to help me," I told her. "We're going to expose him, and we're going to make sure he never does this to anyone else again." She nodded, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and determination. "I'll do whatever it takes." Over the next week, Jenna and I worked together to gather more evidence. She dug through her emails, texts, and hidden files, providing me with a wealth of information about Elliot's operations. It became clear that he had done this before, multiple times. There were other women, other contracts, all carefully hidden beneath layers of plausible deniability. But there was a problem. Elliot was careful, and exposing him wouldn't be easy. We needed something irrefutable, something that would force him to face consequences he couldn't escape. "I know where he keeps his records," Jenna said one night, her voice barely above a whisper. "In his private office. But getting in won't be easy." "Let me worry about that," I said. "You just make sure you're ready to handle the fallout." With Jenna's help, I devised a plan to access Elliot's private office during one of his networking events. Using a fake press pass, I managed to blend in with the crowd, keeping a low profile as I made my way toward the office. Jenna had given me the layout, along with the combination to his safe, a detail she'd gleaned during one of their encounters. Inside, the office was a shrine to Elliot's ego, filled with awards, photos, and memorabilia. But I wasn't there to admire the decor. I went straight for the safe, my heart pounding as I entered the combination. The door clicked open, revealing a treasure trove of evidence. Contracts, photos, emails, everything I needed to expose Elliot for the predator he was. I snapped photos of the documents and transferred the files onto a USB drive, careful to leave everything as I'd found it. As I slipped out of the office, my pulse racing, I knew there was no turning back. Armed with the evidence, I reached out to a journalist I trusted, someone with a reputation for uncovering corruption. When I presented the dossier, she was stunned. "This is huge," she said, flipping through the files. "If this goes public, it'll destroy him." "That's the idea," I said. "But it's not just about him. It's about protecting the women he's hurt and making sure he can't do it again." Over the next few days, the journalist worked tirelessly to verify the information. She contacted other victims, piecing together a story that would leave no room for doubt. When the article finally went live, it was a bombshell. Elliot's carefully curated image shattered overnight, replaced by headlines of scandal, abuse, and betrayal. The fallout was immediate. Elliot's career imploded as more women came forward, emboldened by the article. Sponsors dropped him, projects were canceled, and his publicist resigned in disgrace. For the first time, Elliot was powerless, his influence stripped away by the very people he had once controlled. As for Jenna, the exposure brought a mix of relief and regret. She apologized again and again, her remorse genuine but unable to erase the damage she had done. I told her I needed time to figure out what came next, for us, for me, for everything. "I want to make this right," she said one evening, her voice trembling, "even if it takes the rest of my life." In the months that followed, I began to rebuild. I moved out of the house we had shared, finding solace in a small apartment that felt like a fresh start. Jenna respected my need for space, focusing on her own journey of accountability and healing. As for Elliot, he disappeared from the public eye, his name now synonymous with disgrace. The women he had hurt found justice, their stories finally heard. Looking back, I realized the experience had changed me in ways I couldn't have imagined. It had broken me, yes, but it had also shown me my own strength, the power to stand up for myself, to fight back, and to move forward. In the end, I found peace, not in revenge, but in the truth. And for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again.